Hello literarians, welcome back to the Literary Lori YouTube channel. I am Literary Lori, and if you love to read books or write books that center the lives of Black people or other people of color globally, then you are in the right place, because that is why I started this YouTube channel, to share my love of books, both reading them and writing them, and to share my personal journey going from being a journalist and journalism professor and award-winning nonfiction author in the United States to being a novelist of juicy book club fiction based in the south of Spain. However, this video is not about me. There's going to be plenty of time to talk about me. This video is video number 1 in my Black Literary History series. Okay, so I have been trying for years to get everybody to start celebrating Black Literary History Month in February instead of Black History Month. Why? Because per capita, there are more Black authors, famous Black authors, born in February than any other month. Do I know this to be empirically true? No. However, if you just look at the numbers, if you just look at how many incredible Black authors were born in February, and then just compare it to, like, say, November, you will understand what I mean. So what I'm doing in this special series is I am going to share every single day in February one famous Black author that was born in February. I'm going to try to keep it so that it's actually the birth date of that person who I'm talking about on that day. But there are so many famous Black authors born in February, I can't keep them fully by the date. And there are some days where nobody famous was born. So just bear with me and understand, you're gonna get a Black author born on February every single day of the month of February. Some days you might even get 2. Many of these authors are going to be our literary ancestors. In other words, those that have passed on. Some will be contemporary authors. And because I like to keep my literary life global, most of the authors I'm going to be talking about are Black American authors, but we are also going to have authors who were from Africa, from the Caribbean. I'm keeping it Black in a global sense, because we know writing while Black is universal in the sense of the challenges that come with having your writing taken seriously, getting published, finding an audience. So when we talk about Black authors that we want to highlight, authors and writers, I definitely want to expand the definition of Black for this particular Black Literary History Month. All right, so what I promise to do is to share not only a bit of background and bio information about each author, but I also want to extract some literary lessons from each person as well. So I want to make sure that you're learning a little bit about each author, but more importantly, for my writers out there, I want you to be able to take something from these episodes that can help you in your own writing life, whether it's just inspirational or some actionable advice that you can use to help you in your own writing career. I mean, if you're going to take advice and learn some strategies from a writer, it might as well be from the GO.A.Ts, right? The greatest, the ones who have already proven their excellence, okay? So I hope you enjoy this series. It's a huge challenge for me because this is new. The YouTube for me is relatively new, and I'm coming out the gate promising to do a series every single day. I'm going to be here sharing information about these amazing writers. So a challenge for you to come and check it out, a challenge for me to produce something every single day. But again, there are so many amazing Black writers born in February. It's not going to be a challenge deciding. I guess the challenge is going to be deciding who to cover and who not to. I might even double up some days. It's fine. Anyway, let's get to the point. Today is day 1, February 1st, where we started. And just let's be clear. I have my notes here. I have my my nice little, what is this called? My clipboard. I am a former professor. These are my tools. I cannot memorize all of these facts and stats about these authors. So I'm going to have my clipboard. I hope you don't mind. Anyway, let's get to it. Day one, who are we talking about? Langston Hughes, right? I'm so excited because Langston Hughes is like the GOAT of Black American authors. And it really couldn't be a better start to this series than to have Langston Hughes as our first author, our first highlighted author. So let's get to it. Who was Langston Hughes? All right, so I'm going to read a little bit, talk a little bit. So that's why I'm looking down. Got my clipboard. All right, so believe it or not, Langston Hughes, that wasn't even his real name. I mean, it's his real name, but it was like his middle name. His real name was James Mercer Langston Hughes, and he was born on this day, February 1st, 1902 in Joplin, Missouri. He died on May 22nd, 1967, which means that young Langston was only 65 years old when he died. He died from complications from prostate cancer. Nonetheless, Langston Hughes lived such a full literary life in his 65 short years. He was, I say, the writingest writer of his time. Now, Langston Hughes, many people know him as a poet, and I think that's what he's most well known for. The first book he wrote was actually a book of poems called The Weary Blues. That came out in 1926, so that made him only 24 years old. So Langston was young, handsome, a poet. He was a big deal, and he kind of launched his career as the Harlem Renaissance was taking off. So he was a fixture of the Harlem Renaissance. So again, Harlem Renaissance poet, that's what a lot of people know Langston Hughes for, but Langston Hughes was far more than a poet. Yes, he was, again, his first book was a book of poetry, but Langston Hughes was a journalist, a novelist, an essayist. He wrote plays, he wrote musicals, he wrote essays. He was a war correspondent. There was literally nothing that Langston Hughes didn't write. If the job requirement said must be able to write, he's like, no problem, I can do it. So, and also, he was also a translator. Yeah, Langston Hughes was fluent in Spanish. I've always wanted to do this, just throw this on the floor. Langston Hughes was fluent in Spanish because his father actually abandoned his family when Langston was real young. His father was so fed up with the racism in America. He's like, deuces, I'm out, and he moved to Mexico. And so at certain points, Langston, would go visit his father in Mexico, and that's how he actually became fluent in Spanish. So on top of all of the other things that Langston could do with his pen and his paper, he could also translate. And that's not like, I can say like, por favor, necesito ir al baño. Langston was translating the poetry of some of the greatest Spanish writers of the time. Poetry, essays. So again, his expertise, his skill set was vast. So I could just go on and tell you all of the things that Langston Hughes did, but I don't have to because he did that himself. On top of everything else he wrote, Langston Hughes wrote 2 memoirs, not 1, but 2. One was called The Big C, that was the first one, and the second one was called I Wonder as I Wander. And if you want to know details of Langston's life, read one of these 2 books and you'll get everything that is, except for anything about his like romantic life and his true like intimate relationships. Langston Hughes was notoriously private. I've even read some places where people said that he was asexual. I mean, I just think he was a private person who didn't, what do I know? I did not know Langston Hughes, but whatever, there's a lot of speculations that he was gay, that he was asexual. The point is, you will not find out really like what made Langston's heart hurt in terms of like romance and intimate relationships. That is not in his books. So that is my only personal critique about his memoirs, is that lack of really knowing who he was. his memoirs to me feel like literary documentaries of seeing, where he was and what he was doing, which was fascinating because of the times he lived in and all of the incredible things he did, who he connected with, who his friends were. He was very good friends with Zora Neale Hurston until they weren't. That's a scandal, but we're not going to get into that right now. Point being, it's amazing that Langston wrote these two memoirs so you can really get a sense of the breadth of his life. So what I want you all to know about Langston Hughes, what I think is super important, is that this is facts. Langston Hughes is literally credited as being the first African American writer to make a living solely from his writing. Okay, that's incredible. And I actually would have thought it was Frederick Douglass, but I guess I'm wrong. So, and I don't know how this is calculated, but this is he is in the history books as the first African American to make a living solely from his writing. And I'll tell you how he did that. He was, like I said before, he was the most versatile of writers. And when there was an opportunity for a writer, Langston Hughes, who literally carried a big, bulky typewriter with him, he was there. If he had to drive through the Jim Crow South when lynching was still a popular pastime, if the job was there, Langston would be like, I'll be there in 2 days. For another example, when the Spanish Civil War broke out in 1936, the Harlem Renaissance is pretty much over. The Depression is in full swing. People are, dying, desperate, and hungry. He was offered a job to be a war correspondent for a newspaper to cover the Spanish Civil War. Go over there, embed yourself in with the soldiers, see what's going on. Langston had never been a war correspondent, but he spoke Spanish and he knew how to write. So he was like, let me just book my ticket on the ship. I will go on over to that war, see what happens. He was there for 9 months. So he wasn't afraid to put himself in harm's way. He wasn't afraid to say yes to opportunities, even if they were things he'd never done before. He had enough confidence in himself that he could figure it out, and he did. He once went to Russia because somebody offered him a position to write a movie screenplay for a film that was going to be shot there about the African Americans in Russia. Turns out that film never got made, but he still went. And that wasn't like, let me book a flight. Again, you had to get on a ship and then get on, a train, and God only knows how else to get into Russia from the US. But he did it because he's like, I am going to work as a writer. I honor my craft. I want this work. I don't want to be doing other things on the side and then doing a little, like writing when I can. I'm going to be a professional writer. And once his book came out, The Weary Blues, once he established himself as a writer, that's what he did for the rest of his life. For the rest of his life, he was employed as a writer. So, let's see. Now, I do want to point out that even though he was working as a writer, he still struggled. It wasn't like he had an easy breezy life. The fact that he lived through the Depression, 2 world wars, the Jim Crow segregation was the law for the majority of his adult life. So he did struggle, and yet he was able to prioritize, again, what he wanted to do by taking advantage of opportunities when they came to him, looking for those opportunities, and knowing his audience. And that's also really important because Langston, sometimes he was critiqued and criticized by other Black people because he wrote a series called the Simple series, where it was about like the common Black man, and he would often write in vernacular, Black vernacular. And some of the talented 10th would say, you're making us look bad, you should be writing differently. But Langston knew very clearly that his audience was always Black people, and he knew the people loved the stories he was telling, and he refused to feel ashamed or change his writing because he knew the people who were buying the papers to read his stories, the people who supported him were Black people. So he was very clear about who he was writing for, who his audience was, and the man stayed employed for years. Literally, like I said, until he passed away, he stayed employed because he knew who he was writing for, and he did not compromise that. So The fact that Langston Hughes launched his career, it's like really became big during the Harlem Renaissance, but continued to write for newspapers, again for movies, not movies, sorry, for wrote plays, excuse me, was a newspaper columnist for many, many years. By the time he died, Langston Hughes was not such a he was still well known, but his star had dimmed a bit. But again, he was still a writer. He was still making his living doing what he loved the most. But when he died, he was actually mourned more and celebrated more in Latin America than he was in the United States. No big surprise that the black man doesn't get honored as he should, but he was so beloved and so well known in Latin America. His death caused, a lot. Not celebrations, but there were like public declarations and mournings because of his death, because of how many different people he had worked with, different artists, writers, poets in Cuba, in Mexico, and also in Spain. So it just shows that his work and his impact was felt globally. So here are the literary lessons you writers can take from the life of Langston Hughes. I call these the Langston Hughes lessons for staying employed as a writer if you're not white. All right. So number 1, learn a new language. Now, I know that seems crazy. It might be like, I'm not going to become fluent in Spanish in a few days. And nobody said it had to be a few days. But having that extra language, even if you're not going to be writing in that language or translating, it does give you the opportunity to work in other places besides the United States or wherever you're from. Again, even if you're just able to manage in the other language so that you can go to that place and cover events, even as a travel writer, having a second language can be very advantageous. Number 2, diversify your skill set. Again, Langston Hughes stayed writing, stayed employed through the Depression, through Jim Crow, through like the worst times to be a black person. And mind you, he wasn't just like working, there are people who, got writing jobs that were like secretarial jobs or things like that. But I'm not even talking that. I'm talking about, jobs where his work would be published. He was able to do that because he had diverse skills. And he wasn't pitching himself. He saw job openings and could literally say, I have the skills to do that, hire me. Okay? So even if you love poetry or you love writing plays or you love being a journalist, think about other ways you can diversify your skill set so when other jobs come up, you can apply for them and know you have the skills to be able to do them well. So that's number 2, is diversify your skill set. Be like Langston. Do everything. No, I'm just kidding. You don't have to do everything, but definitely have more than one writing skill set that you can use so when you're looking for jobs, that is it's a possibility. You're not pigeonholed. Number 3, get up and go. Langston's motto, he did have a home in Harlem, but he was so often on the road because he wasn't afraid to move in order to take a job. And it wasn't like he had to move, permanently, but he was not afraid to, go to another city, go to another state, go to another country even if the job was there. Now, for some people, that's not even possible. Maybe you have a family, maybe you have obligations. But if you don't, or your family can travel, the opportunities, especially as the world gets more global, to be working somewhere else in another city, another state, another country, there's other opportunities beyond, in our little small, our small network, if you will. Number 4, say yes more than no. That's one thing I loved about Langston Hughes and why I think it allowed him to build up a skill set is because when opportunities came, even if they didn't sound wonderful and perfect, he still said yes more than he said no. So it's it's a theory, it's a way of life to say to yourself, opportunity comes, I'm going to say yes unless it's really bad. And don't get me wrong, I don't want you to do something dangerous or stupid, but sometimes we take ourselves out of the game because it's new or it doesn't sound sexy or it doesn't sound exactly like what we wanted. Try saying yes to some writing opportunities that maybe you hadn't thought of and see where they could lead you next. And again, remember, Langston Hughes was living through the worst of times to be a black person just period. I mean, you might feel like this is the worst of times, but I mean, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't want to compare per se, but bad times, let's say bad times, where opportunities weren't even, I mean, it was illegal to hire Black people for a lot of things. And these were the ways that he circumvented a life of despair, where he managed to live a glorious life as a writer by saying yes, even when he was scared, by accepting opportunities, even if they weren't in the realm of things that he loved, by going places that might not have seemed like ideal because the job, it was an opportunity to do something that he loved doing. And finally, know your audience. Remember, your audience is as a writer, you have to be writing for somebody. You need readers. And the better you know who your readers are, the more you can create content that they're going to love if you know them. And then you won't be swayed by other people saying, oh, you should be doing this, or you should be doing that, or you should write like this, or you should write like that. If you know your audience and you know why they love you or they love your work, then you're more likely to stay employed or to stay having readers, to purchase your work, to consume your content. So know your audience, know who you're writing for. All right. Last but not least, travel with your typewriter at all times. And that just means stay ready so you don't have to get ready. You never know when a writing opportunity is going to come up. So if you're ready for when it happens, then you don't ever, kick yourself and say, oh man, if only I. So I always imagine Langston Hughes walking around with that big heavy typewriter with him wherever he went, which he literally did. He almost got seriously hurt during the Spanish Civil War. He was on his way out. It was like his last night there, and he had to run from like some bombings that were happening. And he had his giant typewriter, and he was kind of drunk because he'd been partying that night on his way out. And he said that almost he left his typewriter. He had to run, but he couldn't leave his typewriter behind. So if you've ever seen an antique typewriter, they come in like their own suitcases. They are extremely heavy. And so I just see him like stumbling down the street, carrying that typewriter, like, not my typewriter. I'm not leaving that behind. Everything else, but not the typewriter. So stay ready so you don't have to get ready. All right, I wanted to read one poem of Langston Hughes before I let you go, because Langston Hughes is never considered a revolutionary, right? He's considered more of a gentleman writer. He was, again, a poet. And again, he wasn't one of these writers who, like I said, he was very private. He didn't come off as really emotional. He was very practical. But Langston Hughes used his pen to express himself. So I thought this poem was particularly appropriate for the moment we're in right now. So it goes like this. It's called Freedom. Freedom will not come today, this year, nor ever, through compromise and fear. I have as much right as the other fellow has to stand on my own 2 feet and own the land. I tire so of hearing people say, let things take their course. Tomorrow is another day. I do not need my freedom when I'm dead. I cannot live on tomorrow's bread. Freedom is a strong seed planted in a great need. I live here too. I want my freedom just as you. So I think of Langston Hughes as was as revolutionary as they come. His existence as a Black man did not serve white people. He wrote for the pleasure, enjoyment, and upliftment of Black people. He worked as a writer because it pleased himself, and that to me is revolutionary. So please give Mr. Langston Hughes your utmost respect. I have 2 last fun facts to share with you that you can use for, party, like, cocktail party banter. One, the cafe and bookstore Busboys and Poets in Washington, D.C. is actually named for Langston Hughes, because Langston Hughes worked as a busboy at a famous hotel in Washington, D.C. called the Wardman Park Hotel. And he quit his job working for Carter G. Woodson, yes, the man who actually started Black History Month, or Negro History Week as it was called. Langston worked for him. It was a very kind of white collar, important job. And he quit that job working for Carter G. Woodson because he was like, I'm going to be a poet and I need my time and my brain power. So I got to quit this job so I can work on my poetry. And so he got a job as a busboy. So Busboys and Poets was literally an ode to Langston Hughes. So that's number one. And number two, Langston Hughes, when he died, his ashes were interred in a library. Not just any library, but at the Schomburg Library in Harlem. Yes, the Schomburg Center for Research and Culture, which is a research library. His ashes are interred under a slab in the lobby. So every time you walk into the Schomburg, you are stepping on Langston Hughes' ashes. Yes, you are. I think that's pretty cool. And again, it's, great little bit of trivia there, literary trivia. So in closing, Langston Hughes was a prolific writer. Like I said, the writingest of writers. He left us 35 books of poetry, journalism, essays, all of that. He wrote a lot. He traveled a lot. His impact was felt by all of those who read his work, but also because he was a mentor to many young up-and-coming writers, including a young Alice Walker. It feels like they're not even in the same generations that they would even cross paths, but they did. Right before he died, he met with Alice Walker, who was also born in February. Stay tuned for that. So, not only did he write all those amazing books and mentor young people, he also won several prestigious awards, including a Guggenheim Award. He truly was an impressive literarian, an impressive man of letters. Okay, I hope this was helpful. I hope you feel inspired. I hope you had got some lessons that you can apply to your own literary lives. I hope you want to read more about Langston Hughes. I am linking some books about him and by him in the comments section below. If you have any questions or you learn anything new, please leave it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Stay tuned for tomorrow, day 2 of our February literary history. February is Black Literary History, my special series. Thanks for being here. Right on.